Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to TRT World Forum Digital Debates. We're joined by the Ambassador of the Turkish Republic to Lebanon, Hakan Çakıl. He's a Turkish politician, of course, and Ambassador of the Republic of Turkey to Lebanon. Prior to that, Mr. Ambassador worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, assuming various duties. Prior to that, he held the position of Senior Advisor for Cyprus Affairs between 2011 and 2015. And served as the ambassador to Turkey to Nigeria between 2015 and 2018. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for joining us again this evening. It's our pleasure and honor to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to join your program.
So we'll get right into it, of course. So, the subject of the topic this evening is Lebanon, what comes next, particularly in the context after this devastating explosion and the ongoing political and economic crisis in the country. So, already in the midst of its worst economic, financial, and political crisis since the Civil War, there's shortages of essential goods, runaway inflation, and now an increasingly worse COVID-19 outbreak. Amongst all of this, Lebanon's capital was struck with yet another disaster when, of course, nearly 3 tons of ammonium nitrate stored at the Beirut port exploded. In your experience, what was your personal experience of that day, and how do you evaluate the general situation in the days that followed?
Well, first of all, I was very close to the explosion area because the residence of the ambassador here, I am now, is nearly 1.5 kilometers away from the blast area. So on that day, I heard the sirens of the fire brigades, and when I looked from the window, I saw the smoke, and then after, I witnessed the huge explosion. The explosion suffered too much damage in the center of Lebanon. As you say in the beginning of your program, Lebanon has been experiencing the worst economic and political crisis of its since its independence. Definitely, this blast will make the economic situation worsen. How? Let me describe you where we are now and where the explosion happened. The port of Beirut is located in the center of the city. And very close to the port, the Lebanese government established a new concept of downtown in a very touristic and fashionable style, and they have invested too much in that area to attract the foreign investors, foreigners, embassies, and there are lots of restaurants, cafes. It is a very nice area just close to the blast area. And there are 2 main pillars of the Lebanese economy. The first one is finance sector, banking sector. The second one is the service sector. And the heart of the service sector is here, where we are now in downtown Beirut. And the explosion area is nearly 1.5 kilometers away from the blast area. And you may imagine all the restaurants, cafes are heavily damaged. Definitely, they are now closed, and we don't know when they will open, or maybe they will not open some of them. So the economic crisis will continue to worsen because the service sector got a very huge hit after this blast.
So, along those lines, many observers have been saying, of course, since the protests in October, but particularly after this explosion, that some kind of new chapter is beginning in Lebanon, whether for the better or for the worse. How do you see the future economic outlook for the country? And a second sort of follow-up to that is, how do you see the political dynamic being impacted by this explosion, the domestic political environment in particular?
Definitely, a new chapter has already opened in Lebanese political history after the blast, for good or for bad. But the things will be quite different. And the people, they are very frustrated, very angry because their houses damaged. Nearly 1 million Lebanese who are living around the blast area, they were at certain extent affected by the blast. In the coming days, I do not expect too deep political crisis in Lebanon because the political actors in this country, they are also very experienced, and they do not move the things to the point of no return. I mean, what I want to say, sometimes there are political crises among the different political actors. However, none of the actors, they do not want a real deep crisis. And another important thing, I think we should take this into consideration when we assess the situation. Everyone affected because of this explosion, every political party, every sect, or every ethnic group. So this blast, this explosion did not target a single or two groups. So the anger of the people proliferated among all the community. Maybe it is at certain extent good for the Lebanon, because there is no political discussion among the politicians. There is no blame game at the time being. Everyone is asking a very, how can I say, meticulous investigation of the reasons of the blast. But anyhow, there is no government at the timing. The government resigned. We have a caretaker government. We don't know who will be the prime minister. The prime minister is reserved for the Sunni community in Lebanon. Of course, there are lots of candidates for this post, but we don't know who will be the prime minister at the time being. It is too soon to make a prediction. But sooner or later, I think a government will be formed. There may be some ups and downs in the political arena, but I don't expect too deep, too serious political crisis. The economic situation is much more important because the number of the unemployment people has been increasing, and also inflation has been increasing. The exchange rate has been fluctuating very heavily. So. And also these economic conditions has been affecting all segments of the population. I mean, from Christians to the Muslims. So if we take into consideration that this situation is not targeting a single group, or this situation is not affecting a single group, we should not expect a wide and very deep political crisis in the country among the different groups. But there is a general economic crisis which has already affecting all the political actors. So the situation is quite different now compared with the previous years.
And in your assessment there, how do the ongoing protests in the country sort of fit into this political dynamic now? They seem to have been carrying on for some time now with increasing momentum, and many observers have pointed out this has added a somewhat new dynamic to the Lebanese domestic political situation. How do you see that unfolding in your assessment?
Well, maybe in the medium term, not in the short term, there may be some new political parties or political movements can emerge, because especially the young generation, we can call them the generation Z. They are against any sectarian divisions. For instance, when they go on streets, they refuse to carry any flag but the Lebanese one. So they present themselves as Lebanese. So we may consider this as a new outcome in the Lebanese political scene in the coming days, that maybe there may be not political party, but some political movements which is not sectarian, which embrace all the sects and ethnic groups. Actually, since the 17th of October, since the popular demonstration started, some groups, they have been advocating that we are Lebanese. Whether we are Muslim or Christian, or whether we belong to different ethnic groups, we consider ourselves Lebanese, and we want to change the political system in the country. And nowadays, of course, probably the noise or the voice of these groups will be heard maybe more stronger. So not a political party, but we may see some political movements, some more secular political movements in the coming months.
So, in regards to the explosion, Turkey, of course, has announced a number of measures designed to support Lebanon in the aftermath of this devastating explosion. Beyond the short-term aid that's related to the explosion itself, how does Turkey view the economic crisis in the country? And is Turkey in any position to extend longer-term financial support to the country, and under what conditions?
First of all, from the day one, we started to extend humanitarian aid to Lebanon in coordination with the Lebanese authorities. We dispatched tons of medical equipment to the government, and the Lebanese government requested us to provide them medical equipment, and we continue to do this. Of course, we are following very closely the economic and financial crisis and situation in Lebanon. We are ready to help Lebanon, but for these, the bureaucrats and the politicians of the countries, they should come together and discuss the modalities. If we find and agree some modalities, we will be more than happy to assist Lebanon for recuperating the economy, for overcoming the economic crisis.
And do you think that this can be done as part of a regional or international effort, or is it more likely to occur along bilateral lines between Lebanon and specific regional countries?
Well, we are open for all options. We can do this with Lebanon on bilateral basis, or we can join some regional or international organizations. So we are open for this. We do not have any specific condition for this. The Vice President of Turkey and Foreign Minister of Turkey, they paid a call, they made a visit to Lebanon last Saturday, and the message they handed over, they relayed to the Lebanese authorities was the same. We are ready to assist Lebanon, and we want to alleviate the suffering of the Lebanese people. So the modalities, we are ready to discuss any modalities. It can be bilateral, it can be multilateral. It doesn't matter for us.
So, of course, there's a lot of concerns regarding corruption in the country, and specific concerns that material and financial assistance in the wake of the explosion could be caught up in this web of corruption. Of course, there's already been some allegations with regards to some aid delivered from Kuwait that ended up being sold in some pharmacies in the city. What is the process that Turkey is following to ensure that the aid and the assistance that is offered is actually being directed where it is needed?
Well, government of Turkey has been working with the Lebanese army. We are handing over all our aids to Lebanese army. So we are not working with any NGOs on the ground, although we respect them. But the Lebanese government declared 2 weeks martial law just after the explosion. So according to the constitution, Lebanese army is tasked to deal with the effects of this disaster. So our counterpart is Lebanese army. So we have been transferring all our medical aid and other aids to the Lebanese army. So far, we haven't encountered any problems.
And are there Turkish medical teams still on the ground in the country as well at this point?
Yes, we have Turkish medical teams. We have Turkish search and rescue teams. They are working on the ground. The 0 point, the blast area, the explosion area, is divided in 3 parts. In one part, Turkish search and rescue teams, they are working in coordination with the Lebanese army. Yesterday, I visited the site, and I met with a Lebanese general who is in charge with the search and rescue efforts in all the region in the port area. Also, he appreciated the work of our team. We are on the ground.
So moving back to the political scenario, now, of course, that, as you mentioned, the government of Hasan Diab has officially resigned. What is Turkey's position on the political path moving forward? Is there one particular vision that Turkey supports over another? And how is Turkey planning to coordinate with other interested parties, both domestic and international, in advancing a political process in the country?
Well, first of all, we are not intervening the domestic affairs of Lebanon. So we consider the formation of the new government as a domestic internal affairs of Lebanon. Whoever will be the prime minister and form a cabinet, we are ready to work with them. We are not keen to involve some domestic discussions or negotiations among the different parties. We consider Lebanon as a single country, so our approach is not sectarian. So when we look to all Lebanese, we don't see Christian, we don't see Muslim, we see a Lebanese. So we, as a government of Turkey, we are keeping ourselves out of these domestic discussions. Who will form the government? We will work with them. Of course, we wish a speedy formation of the government, which will implement long-awaited and long-needed reforms. Of course, when a government will be formed, we will support them, but we are not taking part in the formation process of the government.
Sure, of course, and of course, there's been increased international attention given to Lebanon, particularly in the wake of the explosion. How and in what sense is Turkey working with or cooperating other international and regional actors, both in coordinating its aid and in, as you sort of mentioned, offering this sort of broad support for the political and economic process moving forward?
Well, the UN Secretary General had an initiative with the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Assistance of the Secretary General. So we are taking part of these efforts. 2 days ago, a video conference held, and the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs also represented in this video call. So we are part of the initiative of the UN Secretary General, and also we are a part and a partner of the CEDR conference, which met in April 2018, and Turkey also is one of the donors for Lebanon. Once the Lebanese government will implement the reform, we have a financial commitment to support the reform process. So regionally and internationally, we are cooperating with the actors.
So you mentioned the CEDRA conference from 2018. As Turkey is part of this process, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit the insights into what sort of particular reforms that the donor countries that Turkey is a part of are looking to see happen before those funds can be unlocked to the country.
Generally, the donor countries, they are requesting the government to implement a reform which includes a strong fiscal policy, a less budget deficit, controlled inflation, and maybe the privatization of some unfeasible state institutions.
I know the electricity sector is often mentioned
Yeah.
as one of the top of
Yes.
the list there. Does the CEDRA conference have a particular pathway that it has presented to the Lebanese authorities in order to achieve these reforms?
Well, according to my knowledge, the CEDR conference does not specify certain steps for the Lebanese government. I mean, the results of the CEDR conference is generally, they are general. So the donor countries, they are requesting the Lebanese government to implement reforms on the sectors needed. But we did not specify that you should do this, you should do that. Everyone knows that the government what they should do. So there is a general requirement of financial and economic reforms or restructuring of the administration. But we don't specify any conditions. You should, let's say, privatize the electricity to Lebanon, this or that.
So in general, from your experience in Lebanon with these international conferences, what are some of the solutions that are being offered both domestically and internationally to offer a way out of the particularly the economic crisis for Lebanon? But also, I'm wondering if you can maybe share some insight into in your view, what potential domestic and regional forces may stand in the way of genuine reform in the country?
Well, of course, it is difficult to answer, but the reforms in every country are not easy to implement, to make. Definitely, maybe some centers in the country or some actors in the country may resist the reforms. I cannot name you this or that, but especially maybe at local political level there may be some resistance on some reforms. But since the popular movement started and since this explosion, probably some parties who have been resisting on some reforms, probably they will change or reconsider their positions. If we remember what we discussed at the beginning of our program, that nothing maybe will be the same after this explosion, because as far as I have observed, a government, the coming government, the new government, should definitely implement some reforms. So, in that extent, probably I don't think there will be a strong resistance for the reforms in the short term.
And I'm wondering, I realize it's a sensitive issue, but I'm wondering if you can give us a bit of insight into your perspective on the sort of development of international parties in Lebanon. From what you've seen so far post-explosion, is it in general, has it been helpful? Are the various international interventions helpful for the situation in the country now? What is Turkey's perspective on the various parties who are now engaging with the country?
Well, our official position is very clear. We are not engaging in domestic politics of Lebanon, and I think it's not very helpful to intervene the domestic affairs from outside. Maybe if you leave the problems, the solving methods, the modalities, the formulas for the Lebanese politicians, political actors, maybe they will reach a better solution among each other. Our position is clear. We are not intervening domestic affairs of Lebanon. So I can only say this.
No, I appreciate that answer, and I think that clears it up very much so. Mr. Ambassador, unless you have anything else to add, I want to thank you for your time. I know we had some technical difficulties the other day, so we really appreciate you joining us again. It's been a very insightful conversation. It's been our pleasure to host you, and we hope that we can perhaps connect again in the near future.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me, and hope to see you soon.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.